6:59. We'll give it a few minutes and see if we get anybody coming on in to join us.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Joey, how are you?
I'm good. I wanted to find out if you were gonna mention uh, Justice Thomas tonight.
Yeah, I'm actually going to sort of start things off with that a little bit and touch base on that. Um,
Awesome.
Let me actually, now that you mentioned that, I should pull that up and make sure I have the info in front of me. There we go. Yeah, we are at 7:02 already. Let's see. I still want to give it another minute just in case. Excuse me. Oh, I opened up the wrong document anyway. Go find the right one. Another 15 seconds or so, and then we're going to get rolling here. Wet my whistle. And good enough for me. We are at 7:04. It is June 30th, 2021. This is the South Carolina Normal Cannabis Conversation. And I'm going to start with our disclaimer like I normally do. All of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. Quick and easy like that. Now, real quick, I'm going to drop a couple of links into the chat. I just want to make sure I get the right ones. Come on, where's what I'm looking for? All right, that worked. Okay. Let me just kind of get my thoughts in order. I want to welcome everybody that's here with us this evening on our cannabis conversation. Anybody who's on with us live, also anybody who might be viewing live on our YouTube channel. Also, hello to anybody who's watching as a recording later on YouTube. Mentioning YouTube, I do want to point out that we are not monitoring the comment section of the YouTube channel during our live broadcast. So if you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, you're welcome to leave them down below in the comment section, and we will come and visit the comment section in a couple of days once everything's done rendering, and we will try and address your questions, comments, or concerns. Again, welcome everybody. My name's Scott Weldon. I'm the executive director of the South Carolina chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Our discussion tonight primarily going to be on decarboxylation. What is it? Why is it important? But before we get into that, I do want to just briefly touch on the news of the week. Um, what I would call I guess, our biggest news so far this week, because we still haven't heard anything from the Senate on a um, descheduling bill. But this was in a written statement issued on June 28th, so it wasn't today, 2 days ago. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, issued by Thomas, he called into question the U.S. government's authority to impose federal prohibitions on the state licensed production and sale of cannabis. Um, as far as I understand, there are no standing cases at the moment addressing this. Um, but let me just kind of get into, excuse me, what was written here a little bit by at National. I'm guessing probably Justin, our political director. Um, Justice Thomas, who's considered to be among one of the more conservative members of the court, acknowledged that the federal government's current approach is a half in, half out regime that simultaneously tolerates and forbids local use of cannabis, of marijuana. Sorry, it says marijuana. I always want to call it cannabis. Specifically, Thomas referred to legislation passed by Congress every year since 2015 prohibiting the Justice Department from interfering in states' medical cannabis access programs. This contradictory and unstable state of affairs, quote, this contradictory and unstable state of affairs strains the basic principle of federalism, he wrote. Thomas further acknowledged that times have changed significantly since 2005 when the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in the Gonzalez versus Reich that the federal law prohibited any state sanctioned use of marijuana as a medicine. even in instances where there is no interstate commerce. Thomas, Thomas was among judges who dissented on that case. He wrote, quote, whatever the merits of Reich were when it was decided, federal policies of the past 16 years have greatly uh, undermined this reasoning. Suffice it to say, the federal government's current approach to marijuana bears little resemblance to the watertight nationwide prohibition that a closely divided court found necessary to justify the government's blanket prohibition in Reich. If the government is now content with to allow states to act as laboratories, act as laboratories, and try novel social and economic experiences, that it might no longer have authority to intrude on the state's core police powers to define criminal law and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens. A prohibition on interstate use of cultivation of marijuana may no longer be necessary or proper to support the federal government's piecemeal approach. Unquote. That was a mouthful. Um, we should probably break that down just a little bit. Referring back to the case of Gonzalez versus Reich, um, which happened 16 years ago. Um, they believe, or at least Thomas here believes that 16 years, um, enough has changed in our nation with marijuana becoming either legal for medical or recreational purposes in many states. I lost count, 37, 36, somewhere in there. Anyway, for medical and less obviously for recreational. Don't have that number in front of me. Uh, but that the government's current approach is letting some do some, some states get away with it and others keep it illegal, and having their foot in it at all when it's so broken up, and states are choosing to make this an option. Um, of course, you've got issues like in Florida where the voters are getting referendums, and then the courts are going, "Nah, we're going to nullify your voter referendum." I don't know how they're getting away with justifying that. I don't. Uh, anyway, let me get back to breaking this down just a little bit more. Um, if the government's now content to allow states to act as I can't mention that one. Um, yeah, it just sort of waters down their authority in determining laws, public safety, and the welfare. Um, a prohibition of interstate use or cultivation of marijuana may no longer be necessary or proper. So that's just basically a government. The government's the one that makes those controls on interstate commerce. Um, Let me just scroll down a little bit further. Thomas issued his comments while presiding over the appeal of a case standing Akimbo LLC et al. Versus the United States, challenging the federal ban on tax deductions for state licensed cannabis businesses. Um, so that's interesting. I don't think I realized that there was a federal ban on tax deductions for state licensed cannabis businesses. I can only imagine that that would have come into effect after some of the first businesses became legal in their states. Um, that the federal government says, okay, fine, but we're not going to give them any deductions. Nanny, nanny, poo, poo. Nope, got another somebody else coming on in. Give me 1 second. There we go. um, so yeah, that was he made these statements during this appeal to this case. It doesn't tell me here uh, how the appeal went, but I'm assuming it sided for the standing akimbo LLC. In response to Justice Thomas's comments, um, Normal's executive director Eric Altieri said, Justice Thomas's comments reflect what has been obvious to the vast majority of Americans for some time now, with nearly half of all Americans residing. Oh, 1 second, I got somebody coming in again. And with that, I'm going to restart that response here. Um, so, yeah, in response to Justice Thomas's comments um, on Monday, Executive Director Eric Altieri of National Normal said that Justice Thomas's comments reflect what has been obvious to the vast majority of Americans for some time now, with nearly half of all Americans residing um, in a state where the use of marijuana for adults is completely legal. It is both absurd and problematic that the federal government or for the federal government to continue to define cannabis as a prohibited Schedule 1 controlled substance. This intellectually dishonest position is in conflict with the available science and the current cultural landscape, and it complicates the ability of states to successfully regulate and oversee state legal marijuana businesses. Altieri concluded, it is time for Congress to end this untenable situation by removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act so that the states can make their own decisions with regard to marijuana and marijuana commerce free from undue federal interference. Now, that's that's very good news. It doesn't change any legislation. Um, Unlike the case with Timothy Leary back in 1968, where he challenged um, the prohibition, the Stamp Act, and got it overturned as being unconstitutional. Thank you, Timothy Leary, um, because this was just a statement he made during another appeal of another case. Um, but it's a pretty darn strong statement from a conservative Supreme Court justice. Anyway, I did want to touch on that before we kind of got into our other discussion tonight on decarboxylation. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about Justice Thomas's comments and what it may have to what it may have to do with changing legislation anywhere? Since we have a couple people join, since I dropped this link in, I'm going to drop the link in again real quick to the decarboxylation guide. There it is. Joey says he thinks he's laying out a plan to follow. I mean, I think Eric Altieri really sort of hit it on the head. It's just our government kind of talking out of both sides of its mouth, um, and that really we need to just remove it from Schedule 1 um, and let the states get to changing their legislation. I think the other thing, and Justin mentioned this the other day in a conversation, is this is a conservative judge, a conservative Supreme Court justice. So this would be a quote to share with your conservative legislators. And being in South Carolina, we know that a majority of our legislators are conservative. So this would be something to maybe, now's a great time to just sort of shoot out a letter to your representatives and to your senators and say, hey, I just wanted to share this information with you that, Supreme Court Justice Thomas said, blah blah blah. Yeah, and we think he hit the nail right on the head, and we really need to start moving forward in South Carolina to decriminalize and change and reform marijuana laws and get that out to your legislators. That's a little something for me to put on my checklist to do because that's a good idea. Um, all right, I don't see any other comments or questions on that at the moment. Again, the only other thing, federal level, I did want to mention more act. We know came out and was reintroduced in the House a couple weeks ago. We are still waiting. and waiting. If you can't see, I'm twiddling thumbs here a little bit. Da, 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 for the Senate to do their whatever the new version of the MORE Act will be. Um, I've said it over and over again. I'm expecting it any day, and that's been over a month now. I've been saying that, so maybe even longer. No, probably about a month. Um, so anyway, that's all we have at the federal level that I wanted to touch at base on. Not our main topic of the night. And crap, we're almost 20 minutes in here. Um, what I did do again, if for anybody that recently joined us, I dropped a copy of a guide to decarboxylation into the link. I got a kind of a kick out of the person who published it because this was published by our own local Holy City Sinner here in Charleston. This was actually published about 9 months ago, back September 21st, 2020. Um, and it's a pretty good breakdown from someone who doesn't focus on just focus on cannabis. Usually I'd expect to see something like this on a Leafly or High Times or a more cannabis focused publication. We do know that the folks at Holy City Center are supporters of marijuana law reform, but it wasn't until a Google search that I found this article. I thought we should kind of focus on this article for our conversation. I am going to share one other link here with you. This is a link to a YouTube um, video. You can like copy it, save it for later if you like, or something like that. But this is another really pretty quick video. It's a little over 3 minutes, a little under, well, 3 minutes, 20 seconds, it tells me here. Probably a little less after some of the intro junk. But it is a real nice, quick description of what is decarboxylation and why is it important, which is our topic tonight. So um, let's start there. What is decarboxylation? Why is it important? And I'm gonna kind of click myself over to the article instead of the video because it starts in a little bit different place than the video does, drags it out a little bit more. But it mentions that did you know that our body produces 90% of serotonin, one of its happy hormones, in quotes it has there, in the digestive tract is where it's produced, or that the lack of natural serotonin supplies may give way to depression. By contrast, high levels of this hormone may give arousal decreasing effects. Serotonin, however, undergoes decarboxylation, something I didn't know until I read this article, before it becomes serotonin. It's pretty much the same as dopamine. With dopamine, um, it also goes through a decarb. It needs to be dark. I can't. Lost my words there. Decarboxylated, um, and this applies to many other compounds like amino acids and yes, even cannabinoids. So, what is decarboxylation? And why should we care? Isn't that something that only scientists with well-equipped labs can conduct? Well, the answer is pretty simple: is um, we can all kind of decarboxylate right at home. So, what is it? If you break down the word decarboxylation into its Latin or into its root, it is decarboxylation. D in Latin means a removal of. Carboxyl pertains to an organic carbolic acids, and then ation is a suffix that denotes an action or the process of performing something, which is that D, that removal. So you put it all together, and basically is the process of removing carbolic acids. Um, I just want to get my little mic button out of the way. I keep thinking I'm gonna hit it and mess up my mic. So yeah, when you put it all together, that's all it is removing carbolic acids. So to kind of give you an example, and I'm going to kind of flip over to another train of thought here. If you would just start eating the cannabis plant, very little is going to happen. because in the cannabis plant, you'll find not THC, but THCA, not CBD, but CBDA, and so on. There is an A stands for acid. That's an acid that's attached to the molecule, and it does not. And THC does not become psychoactive until the bond is broken with that acid, and the acid removed from the from the molecule. Um, I, I'm going to really quickly sidetrack here and mention what the THC we're talking about for psychoactive effect is delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. Um, in a couple of coming weeks, not next week, but I think the following week, we are going to do a little bit of a discussion on um, different forms of THC, Delta 8. New one I'm hearing about is Delta 10. I did a little bit of research on some of this not long ago, but it's all a matter of where certain parts of the molecule are attached in the molecule chain. And so that's where, if it's an eighth, I don't want to call it link, but I know that's not the word for it, or the 10th, that's where you get your Delta 8 or Delta 10. But there's like a Delta 3A, there's a Delta 6, there's apparently a whole bunch of different variants of the THC molecule, and all where certain things are just placed along the chain. So, um, but yes, if you would just sort of take the raw cannabis, num, 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 chew it up, nothing's going to happen. Um, I may have mentioned in one of our conversations, actually, I did mention in our conversation last week when we were talking about cannabinoids in general, and that one of my frustrations with South Carolina law and the hemp law is that the CBD hemp law is that they prohibit the sale and possession of unprocessed hemp, CBD. So when I initially think about that, I think of what they're. I'm sorry. When they think about it, they're thinking about hemp flower, smokable hemp. Well, there's a little bit of an issue in that is that hemp flower, um, they want to make illegal anyway. But it needs to be again. It's there's difference between hemp flower because I'm sorry, that's where my train of thought was going. It needs to be processed to become that sellable, smokable hemp, which means you know, drying process, curing process, um, getting it down to the proper humidity, and this takes time, and it is a process. So when they say, "Oh well, it's on," when SLED and the state attorney general try and claim it's unprocessed hemp, that's a misrepresentation. Their other objection to it is because the equipment to be able to test it um, is uh, I know at the time originally they did not have any testing equipment for it. I think they did eventually get some, um, but that's a big part of it. Now, my issue, my comment last week was I'd really rather have the access as well to the raw cannabis, to the raw hemp for juicing. Um, again, you're not going to get high from it because it's THCA, it's THC, CBDA. You could heat up it, you could decarboxylate it, and we'll get into that just as we go forward here in a couple of moments here. But anyway, that was a sidetrack. Is going back talking about the raw hemp in that manner. Um, so yeah, um, decarboxylation that is going to like completely change the game as far as your cannabinoids, um, because what it does is it takes time and it takes heat to break that bond with that acid molecule in the molecule, that acid, carbolic acid, basically. Um, and you have to be kind of careful with it, how it's done. I see that we have, let me kind of put a pause over here. Comment from Kevin. It says, decarb your herbs, heat it up to make them active. And yes, it's a matter of heat, it's a matter of time. That's why when smoking it, you can get high from it because the matter of the fact that you're heating it, match, light, or whatever the case may be, is basically decarboxylating it for you in your smoking device at that point. Um, Vaporizing it as well. You're bringing it up to different temperatures and you're heating it and you're vaporizing off the cannabinoids. Um, you don't necessarily need to get to those kind of vaporization temperatures if you want to decarboxylate. Matter of fact, you don't want to because you don't want to vaporize off your other cannabinoids if you're going to then, after decarboxylating your flower, um, using it to put into edibles, making tinctures, that type of thing. Let me just kind of finish reading Kevin's comments here to everybody. He mentions how when making CBD, it's always above the legal THC tolerances and that they have to cut it to lower the THC potency to fit in with the legal parameters. And I don't remember, I believe um, processors are allowed to, somewhere in their process, be able to have zero point 0.9 instead of the 0.3%. But then again, to make it into a retail product, they have to dilute it, cut it back to that legal process. Um, there has been some discussion. I'm not even sure if it's in effect here in South Carolina anymore, or if it ever got in effect. Um, looking into the excuse me. My brain is just kind of farting out for a moment here. Upping that THC level in the hemp plant. And I think some of the growers and processors would like to see that get up to 1%, um, so that they can have a little bit of leeway. Yeah, different things in the field are going to change. Genetics are not the only thing that determine the potency, the amount of THC and CBD and all the other cannabinoids. It's not all determined strictly by genetics. Environment as well can determine or have determining factors on that. Um, Now, Kevin, you may be able to. I always said 0.3%. I thought it was like a third of 1%. Is that incorrect? You're having it as a 300th of a percent. So I'm just kind of curious. Uh, anyway, to get it to your legal numbers of 0.03. Um, so anyway, when you're decarboxylating, like I mentioned, you want to take it using heat, using time. Um, you want to break that acid off of there. Um, so the decarb process can start as low as 100 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are talking Fahrenheit. We are in the U.S. here. I don't have the uh, Celsius numbers. Um, And so generally, it's people say it's a matter of time and temperature, and you can do it by putting it on a cookie sheet in your oven. Um, some people have used a crock pot. You don't really need to go out and buy any real expensive kind of equipment, although you do want to be able to control your temperatures. I've always been afraid of trying to decarboxylate in my oven because my oven, even for my cooking, it has such huge temperature swings. Um, I'm afraid that I'm going to get too hot or too cold, too cool temperatures, not get either full decarboxylation or get vaporization of my other cannabinoids. Um, so I don't like the idea of trying it in my oven. I just think my oven's way out there with its temperature swings. Um, I like the idea of going around the Okay, we do have 0.3%. That's where I thought we were. Um, Again, this article talks about you can get decarboxylation from about 100 degrees to 150 degrees. It can start in there. Um, your vaporization for your THC um, can start disappearing, 300, 315 degrees. Um, so you don't want to go over that 300-degree mark because you don't want to vapor off your THC or your other cannabinoids. Um, so suggestions are a lot of times about 200 and 40 to 50. Um, I've always thought I like the idea of just putting it in a mason jar in some boilingish water or even in the crock pot. Um, those temperatures are a little bit lower, so you might need a little bit more time. At 240, 245, you're probably talking at about 25 to 30 minutes until your product is pretty much fully decarboxylated. Um, you also want to maybe give it a little shake or turn as you're going along just to kind of distribute the heat properly um, as you're processing your product. Um, and so at that point, you could then, once your product is decarbs, oh, we got Google link. What are we talking here? Oh, tech data. We are going to be talking too in another couple of weeks. I mentioned earlier in our conversation. Um, Actually, let me go back and find this. Next week, on the 7th of July, we will have Michael Harvey coming in and speaking with us. Um, Let me go back to my email and see if I can. Actually, I think it's in Messenger. I don't want to get it wrong. I cannot find it. Where did I go? Anyway, he was going to be talking about VA related, vet related cannabis issues. Um, I don't know why I can't find this in my email. He thought he sent me a little over. Oh, never mind. There it is. I didn't. His email's in under a different name. Um, so yeah, July 7th we'll be talking about cannabinoids and the military is basically the title of his uh, talk. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. I believe the following week or the week after, we will be talking about the Delta 8, Delta 10, the different THCs that we're seeing coming out. And also in one of those weeks, we'll have again Vaughn, our secretary, Vaughn Postema, come on and talk to us about certificates of analysis. Um, Although we don't have dispensaries and we don't have good analytics in our state, you can't get the guy down, your guy, to kind of give you the analytics. I mean, unless he's bringing in from a legal state and has that information, that would be kind of dandy. Um, but we're going to go over that information just for the knowledge. So let me get back to the decarb box before I get way too sidetracked, which I'm already kind of going in that direction. Um, so once you get your decarboxylated product, um, now it's time that you can apply those to your butters and to your edibles and things like that. Um, if you're making can of butter, and a lot of people like to start there. Is link didn't work? Let me peek at it. Data extractions PDF. It's still loading for me, but give it a minute. I don't know how big it is. I'll go look at that in a second. because one thing when you're doing extractions is you pretty much want to use a fat for it to bind to. Um, that's why yeah, that's why it hangs in on cannabinoid, on drug test for 30 days because it likes to like hang out and bind to fats. Um, so to be able to incorporate that into your edibles or your tinctures, um, winterized removes fats. I don't think I understand the comment. Winterized. Okay, yeah, that data sheet link that you sent that loaded up on mine. But yeah, if you need to add fats like butter, oil, um, no, okay. You freeze the crude oil to filter and remove fats. Um, yes, I gotta admit to everybody, I am not well versed. I've never decarboxylated anything. uh, unless it was just something that sat in my car for too long. Right. To reach the distillate or isolate. Okay, now I understand where you're going. You want to remove the fats as you get to that distillate or isolate form because you don't want it in your distillate, so your isolate. But if you're cooking it in edibles, fats are okay. You want to kind of keep them in there. At least that's my understanding of the mechanics of it. Um, yes, MTC basically is coconut oil type or butter. Um, MTC, medium chain triglycerides, something like that. Yes, I got it right. Woo! Um, all right. Where are we time wise? I see we're getting up 20 of. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of finish up here with the decar box talk, and that way, if anybody has any other questions or comments, and I appreciate your input and your conversation with us, Kevin. Um, So yeah, it's important to make sure that you decarb your buds before you cook with them. This way you can preserve the cannabinoids and you can incorporate them into your dishes. And that is basically what the little guide that I showed you goes over. Um, again, watch that video that I sent you the link to on YouTube. 3 minutes of your life, and it's worth it if you are cooking with cannabis. All righty. I find it all interesting. I like the information, um, and I would love one day where we have legal cannabis in South Carolina, and things become I would say hopefully more economical um, before I start playing with that kind of stuff. I'm just not. Mind you, I have worked with somebody one time and we did decarb and made our own butter. Oh, a number of years back. I'm going back probably 7 8 years or something like that. Um, made our own dabs, and it was an interesting process. But the thing I hated about it was after you're done, you still have plant material. It's like, what do I do with that now? Now, mind you, I bake with it. Yeah, I put it in muffins. And, yeah, I bake with the stuff. Um, start with relatively good, clean product. You don't want a whole bunch of chewy stems and stuff in there if you can help it anyway, because you're not going to get much from them. Um, but cook with it. Good fiber, if nothing else. Let me scroll down, see if there are any other comments. Nope, we're good. Um, So that is what I have for you tonight on decarboxylation. Um, I think I got my mouth working right. I can say it now for the rest of the night if I need to, and I won't need to. Um, Anybody have any questions or tips or thoughts or ideas?
I have a question that's off subject.
Okay, let's see what we can do for you.
Did you hear anything about the North Carolina medical vote today? It's supposed to happen at 2. I didn't hear the results.
No, I didn't, but let me real quick see if I can find anything.
I just get excited when I see it working itself this way.
No, I'm seeing nothing new on North Carolina Normal's page, and they're pretty active. Um, and they probably would have posted something if they had it, but I can't be certain of that. Is that the Senate bill you're talking? Senate Bill 711 passes a medical. Yep. Let me look at this real quick. I'll
I
do
think
another
Joey
quick.
said it passed out of committee. That's what it was.
Is that what it was? Okay. Passes first vote in North Carolina Senate. So I'm assuming that's a committee vote. But let me go look at the article real quick. Bear with me. Love Google. It helps me find stuff fast. Yep. Okay. Voted out first vote in Senate committee. Okay. It doesn't really give me a whole lot more information. But yes, it did pass. It did get a vote on it in the committee. I don't know if that means it passed out of that committee. But yes, it got a positive vote today. Passed committee, first time ever for North Carolina. Thank you, Joey. Yes, it did. They voted to move it forward. Okay, so it did move out of committee and move forward. Now, is that moving to any other committee? Sometimes we know these things jump from committee to committee. We'll have to keep an eye on that. I must admit, I don't keep an eye on what's going on in North Carolina as much as I should because they've been pretty active and we're doing nothing right now. Um, so don't forget if you get an opportunity to and are interested, go ahead and follow North Carolina's Facebook page. They're pretty active out there. NC Normal, and give them a like. They can't have too many. Can't have too many likes. Um, Thank you for your question. I appreciate that, Josh. Any other questions, comments, concerns? They can be on topic, off topic before we close up shop tonight. Not seeing any mics turn on, so I am going to call it a conversation for tonight. Turn it into a race with North Carolina. I hate to admit, I think they're still going to kick our ass. Um, I actually heard somebody say they think if McMaster had somebody run against him, he might vote for marijuana. But I also heard he's not running, so I don't know. But we'll have to have that conversation another night. Gang, I appreciate you all coming and spending some time with me and talking about decarb tonight, talking a little bit about Justice Clarence Thomas. We will be back next week again with Mike Harvey talking about vets, cannabinoids, and the military. Please join us for that at 7 p.m. next Wednesday. Also, if you have any questions and want to contact us, visit our website at normalsc.org or scnormal.org. They'll take you to the same place. Email us at normalsouthcarolina@gmail.com. Visit our social media on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, in case you missed the conversations, you can go and plug in and sit there and enjoy them with a cup of coffee from your own living room. Again, thank you for joining me. We'll see you back here next week, 7 p.m. And have a good night. Bye, y'all.